And before I introduce our guest speaker today, he was kind enough to supply me with a short bio. I wanted to list a couple of his accomplishments from this impressive list. Mike Doherty has a 49-year industrial electrical utility experience as scientific engineering technician, industrial instrumentation technician, a licensed electrician, and training professional and safety consultant. He was the electrical safety program coordinator at the Darlington Nuclear Power Plant. Since 2002, he's been president of the Blue Arc Electrical Safety Technologies Company. For 12 years, he was chairperson of the ZED 462 Technical Committee, and he's the chair association for 2 years for the Electrical Utility Safety Professionals in Ontario. And for 2 years, he was the IEEE Electrical Safety Committee Construction Subcommittee Chair. In 2013, he was the recipient of the IEEE Petroleum and Industrial Committee Electrical Safety Excellence Award. In 2017, he received the Technical Presentation Award for the Best Electrical Safety presented at NETA Power Test Conference in Anaheim. And in 2019, he was recognized as the individual who demonstrated outstanding administrative leadership and contributions on the subject of electrical safety at the Electrical Safety Workshop, the IEEE Electrical Safety Workshop. Certainly an impressive list of accomplishments. And with that, I'd like to introduce and hand the baton over to Mr. Mike Doherty. Perfect.
Okay, good, excellent. All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be. Never quite sure. Thanks very much, Jim. I appreciate your introduction. So what I want to discuss today, and it's a discussion, it's an open-ended discussion, but I did call it, as you can see, practical and pragmatic execution of human performance tools. Trying to take what I think to be is one of the jewels of certainly of the electrical safety world. And I'm going to be speaking mostly today in regards to electrical safety. I'm going to touch on a little bit of where I believe human performance can also be used in the business world. And so we're going to touch on so leading and lagging indicators a little bit. We're going to step into risk assessment procedure. But I believe the best way to make something practical using human performance tools, which we'll obviously talk about, is to embed it in risk assessment procedure, which I think is a really, really valuable thing. So that'll be the discussion we can have today for 50 minutes or so. So the agenda is pretty much copied and pasted right from the one that I sent you. This is just a webinar given by myself, and we'll discuss the history and I believe the intense value of using the human performance, and HU is just an acronym for human performance. So the intense value of human performance, best practice methods, not only the electrical sector, but also in the business world. And I believe you can use human performance best practices in almost anything that you do. It doesn't need to be electrical safety or business. It can be used in absolutely anything, because as we'll see, if you've never looked at the error precursors, it makes sense to everyone. The error precursors are what raises the risks for any endeavor that you take. So we'll kick that around a little bit. And how can that execution of these practical high-end human performance concepts and any level of job planning influence not just your safety, but your corporate units as a whole, from the workers on the shop floor right to the CEO suite? And then the error precursors, to me, these are the risks to any endeavor at work. We'll see again when we go through them. So this pragmatic or practical implementation of the human performance tools are risk reduction methodologies. We want to keep the risks as low as possible for anything that we do. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to delve deeply into what I consider some of the true jewels of safety, the business world, or almost any other endeavor that you might consider. So how are we going to do that today? Well, first thing I want to touch on is risk assessment procedure as a fundamental and critical tool for all your workplace initiatives, business electrical safety concerns, as I've already said. I'd like to consider, one big thing. What's the one big thing you could walk away from, when you listen to the the webinar today. So it's to explain how the human performance best practices can supercharge your risk assessment procedures. That's the part that I think is so cool. For those of us that use risk assessment procedures already, I believe we need to embed the human performance tools into the risk assessment. And for job planning, for any plan that we do at work. And one of the reasons I believe risk assessment is so powerful, in the UK, in the United Kingdom, it is a law and a regulation that risk assessment procedure will be built into workplace activities in the planning section. In North America, in Canada, in the United States, it's a best practice. Why do we care about what goes on in the UK? In the UK, they have about 1/4 of the workplace fatalities we have. And I absolutely believe it's because risk assessment procedure is an integral part of what they're expected to do. This was a presentation I just said, human performance and electrical safety is where the rubber hits the road. It was a presentation that I did. So I've been leaning on this human performance thing for quite a while. As the chair of CSA Z462, which is the Canadian equivalent of NFPA 70E, Workplace Electrical Safety, in 2012, because of my electrical or my nuclear power station background, I asked our technical committee on Z462 if they would consider developing an electrical safety annex on human performance. They weren't really interested at the beginning. We talked a little bit about it. Some of the really good people on our technical committee stepped up and did a fabulous job on it. So if you have a copy of CSA Z462, you'll find Annex U is Human Performance and Workplace Electrical Safety. We instituted it in Canada in 2015. We tried to put it as a public input to our friends on the 70E committee. We worked very closely with them. It's been a wonderful collaboration. They didn't want it in 2015, but they did copy and paste it into NFPA 70E in 2018, which was fabulous. So we get a chance to share some of our thoughts with them, along with all the great things that they have sent our way. If you were to look at human performance just as a preamble to the whole piece, it says in the standards, human performance is an aspect of risk management that addresses organizational, leader, and individual performance as factors that either lead to or prevent errors and their events. Nothing about electrical safety. It applies to everything. The objective of human performance is to identify and address human error and its negative consequences on people, programs, processes, the work environment, and organization or equipment. And a lot of it quickly came from the U.S. nuclear Navy submariners in the United States. Studied back in the 1980s, they studied the U.S. medical industry and they studied the U.S. airline industry where they were having problems and looking for error precursors. And they've done a wonderful job in the U.S. Navy nuclear submariners looking at error precursors and bringing the risks down by adding human performance tools. So when a lot of these people left the U.S. Navy, they would end up in U.S. nuclear power plants. It made sense. They understand the culture. We ended up in our Canadian nuclear power plant with an American CEO for a couple of years. They always switch them around. And that's when we get injected with the human performance best practices and latched right onto it. So it's been really good. So why risk assessment procedure is a precursor to human performance is kind of where I want to go. The risk assessment concept, just very, very generally, says risk is the possibility of suffering harm or loss or danger. Could that be an electrical safety? Of course, from shock or arc flash. Could that be a business proposition? Somebody at your place of business wants to spend $250,000 to do something. That risk definition you see in red absolutely applies. Is the likelihood of injury or severity of injury that may be consequences of a hazard? I'm more focused on safety, but certainly the likelihood of losing financial resources, severity of losing financial resources, and consequences. They're all there. If you look in the electrical safety world, of course, there's shock, there's arc flash, all kinds of, there's enabling loops. So we're going to look at that a little bit in a moment. Where are we losing control of our work? I consider that to be kind of in, a lot of it can be in the enabling loops further up in the management food chain. And we'll look at it quickly, but how far back do we need to go? Electrical incidents, Their leading indicator, what I call mandatory audits. We'll touch on clarity. Clarity, everybody thinks they understand clarity. But if you look at the antonyms to clarity, they are murkiness and vagueness. What we cannot have in any work area at all is anything murky and anything vague. So that's where I believe the human performance best practices as embedded in risk assessment procedure will bring a lot more clarity, less murkiness, less vagueness to